and welcome to my channel. Today I thought we'd take a look at deconvolution sharpening in Photoshop Lightroom Classic. Let's take it from there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two images here. We've got this selected image here, which is a Nikon RAW file, and we're going to sharpen that one up, and then I'm going to do the same with this, but this is a JPEG, and we'll look at the differences in the settings. So let's go back to the first image, the raw file. I'm going to go to the develop tab now, and we need to come down to the detail configuration box, which is where we will find sharpening and denoise. Now I'm not going to look at denoise. For what I do in photography, most of the stuff I do is indoor portrait stuff using prime lenses at low ISO, so noise is not so much of an issue for me, and other people can explain it much better, so I'm going to leave that alone, and we are just going to look at sharpening. Now before we start, it's worth pointing out here, so as I mentioned earlier, this is a Nikon RAW file, NEF file, and when raw files are brought into Lightroom, they are automatically given a certain level of sharpening. And we can see here, so I'm just going to double click on this just to prove that it's at default. So this file has already been given an amount of 40. This is not percentage, this goes up to 150. Yeah. So we're at, let's just put that back to where it was. We are set at 40, we have a radius set at 1.0 and a detail set at 25 by default for raw files. Now, when we come to look at the JPEG, we'll see that Lightroom doesn't add any sharpening to that at all, but it does for the raw files. Bear in mind also that your camera, depending on your settings in your camera, may also be adding sharpening to it. So in fact, by the time you've brought your image into Lightroom, it may have already been sharpened twice already anyway. So you've got your camera sharpening and you've got your default sharpening in Lightroom, which you can turn down if you want to. Anyway, so back to the deconvolution method. What we do with this method is really quite simple. So we start off with the radius and we pull that fully to the left, which brings us to 0.5. We then come down to the detail and we pull that fully to the right, which gives us 100. We then zoom in on that image, and I'm going to click on the button here to zoom to 100. And now I'm going to start adjusting my sharpening to the amount that I feel is appropriate. And so let's just have a look at that. So we're at 40. And I think that's about where I want to be. It's very much personal choice. So I'm going to leave that there then at 45. However, the next thing we want to do, well, in fact, the last thing we want to do is then add masking. Now, if we look at the image back at 100%, so I've increased, or I've set my sharpening on this image, and I'm focusing on the eye because that's the bit that I want. I want the eyes to be as sharp as they can possibly be. However, I don't want that sharpness applied to the whole picture, really. Any facial blemishes and things like that are going to be sharpened, which is going to make them stand out even more. So what we can do to get around that is we can mask off and tone down the sharpening. However, so this is what this masking tool does here. But if I start turning that to the right, you don't really get any kind of sense of what's actually happening there and how much and where you are masking that image. So what we have to help us in Lightroom is if I bring it fully back to 0, and if I now hold down the Alt key and now left click on that slider, you'll see it goes white. Now if I start slowly moving that across to the right, what we're seeing there is the image being masked, and as it goes black, those parts are no longer being sharpened. So what we're trying to do is end up with the bits of the image that we do want sharpened and not the rest. So I don't want the face to be sharpened, so I don't want to see all the details of the face there like we can there. So I want to get the details of the face away, but I do want the eyes to be clear and any surrounding fine line details. So that there for about me is about it. And if I now let go of those buttons, that is how we would use the masking slide to do that. So that basically is the deconvolution method. So it is literally, I'll just mention it again, you just pull the radius over to the left, you pull the detail over to the right, you then zoom in and set your sharpening as you want it, and then you adjust the masking by holding down the Alt key in Windows to get the required effect. And that's pretty much it. Now once you've done that, one of the nice things about Lightroom, because it's a workflow tool, you could then apply those sharpening settings to your other images that you've taken in that particular collection. So if I wanted to, for instance, take the sharpening from this image, you select the image, come across to photo, come down to develop settings and select copy settings, then deselect any previous junk that you've got on there, check none, and you want to come across to the detail box, and here we've got the sharpening checkbox, and the two below refer to the noise. So we check that, we then select the copy button, and we've now copied the sharpening details from that image. And then if we wanted to copy it to a range of pictures that we've taken in the same shoot, we would just select those. So as an example, these three images, and we'd just go through a similar process. We'd come back up to photo, back to develop settings, and this time we would just then click on paste, and it would then automatically paste those settings, that sharpening, to those three images. I won't do that because I don't want it on those three images, but that's all you need to do. So there you go. So that is using the deconvolution method on a raw file. Now let's just quickly do the same. It's the same method for the JPEG, but we'll just look at the config settings. So let's try the JPEG next. Okay, so let's now take a quick look at a JPEG image. So I'm going to highlight my JPEG there. I'm going to come back to develop, and we're back at the detail box, which is where we want to be. I'm just going to double click, left click on the amount, just to prove that it's at default. And we can see here at default for JPEG images, no sharpening is set. Whereas for my raw files, it is set to 40. So anyway, so if we want to go through the same procedure, first of all, I can't activate any of these other sliders until the amount has been adjusted. So I'm just going to do a quick look at the sharpening already. Now at 100%, we can see that this image already is really quite nicely sharp to my mind anyway. So I'm going to pull it up a little bit just for the sake of the demo, but I'm going to leave it around about there, and we'll come back to that in just a second. So I'm going to come back to fit image to size. I'm now going to go through our routine for the deconvolution. So the settings are 0.5 radius. We've already got the detail across to the right hand side. I'm going to pull the masking all the way back to the left. And now I'm just going to hold down the Alt button and then left click on the masking slide and then start moving it across slowly. And again, I want to lose the detail in his face, but ensure that we can still see particularly the detail in the eyes. So that is showing that that's the part, those are the parts that are going to be sharpened. So I'm going to go about there with that. And that's it. So again, with the JPEG, we could come back into the library, we could copy those settings and copy them across to any remaining images in that particular portrait shoot if they were under the same environment. And that is pretty much deconvolution. There are loads of different methods of sharpening images. People have, many photographers have their own favorite, and some even use third-party tools outside of their photo editing tools to do this. However, this is just one quick and easy method that I find helps my workflow. So yeah, so hope you found this useful, and thank you for your time. Goodbye.